Names. It's usually the first thing we learn about someone. And in the world of Masters of the Universe, a name tells you everything you need to know about a character. Whiplash, a dude who will whip or lash at you with his reptilian tail. Ram Man, a man who will ram you. And Fisto, well, let's just leave that one alone. Moving on. And then there's this lady, whose name tells you everything you need to know about her. She's just a bad, bad girl. Building a boys' toy line in the 80s was a pretty easy formula. You needed a hero, you needed his friends, you needed a villain, and you needed his henchmen. Simple as that. But here's the thing, even back then when everybody swore up and down that boys' toys and girls' toys lived in two completely separate universes, companies still felt this weird, nagging need to balance the cast. Even if they were convinced that little boys couldn't care less about a girl character, I mean, where would they get a silly idea like that? It never actually stopped them from putting one in anyway. Practically every cartoon out of that decade had at least one woman on the roster, just to cover their bases, on both sides. Good girls and of course, bad ones. And when it came to Masters of the Universe, nobody was being subtle about it. You want the token female villain? Well, here she is, Evil Lyn. Evil Lyn hit shelves in June of 1983, part of the second wave of the Masters of the Universe line, introduced for one very specific reason. The Evil Warriors needed a woman. Mattel designer Colin Bailey, the same guy behind Trapjaw and Buzz-Off, got the assignment, and his early concept art traces back to designer Mark Taylor's idea for a character called the Sorceress, or the Goddess, originally conceived as a double agent, a changeling, playing both sides of the war. You can still see that DNA in the V-shaped headpiece design. Her working name during development was Sultra, which, if the root is what I think it is, sultry, meaning deeply attractive, sensual, suggestive of hidden desire, might have been a bit too much for the kiddies. So, a few months before the toy hit shelves, the name got swapped to something more age-appropriate and direct, Evil Lyn. That said, the name change didn't erase every trace of her more grown-up origins. The concept art notes literally instruct the sculptor to make her face resemble Sophia Loren, who, in case you're not in the know, wasn't just a beauty icon back in the day. She's still best known to this day as a sultry screen legend. Loren built a career on being tough, magnetic, and dangerous all at once. An earthy, fierce alternative to the more polished Hollywood starlet we usually associate with the good girls. Exactly the kind of face you'd want on the one woman in Skeletor's beastly, monstrous boys club lineup. As for the actual figure, from the neck down, Evil Lyn is Teela, same body mold. That's just how the vintage line worked. You didn't sculpt a new body for every character. You repainted and reheaded the ones you already had tooling for. And since she was female, Mattel couldn't employ the usual bare-chested buck plus swappable armor trick they used on the guys. So yeah, Evil Lyn showed up in the same one piece as Teela, with the same ornate sculpted armor detailing. The toy shelf equivalent of every woman's nightmare showing up to a party in the same dress. But hey, that's just how it was done back then. To be fair, Mattel did try to visually differentiate her from Teela, beyond the obviously unique head sculpt. She got her own accessory in the crystal orb staff, molded in glow-in-the-dark plastic, plus an overall darker color palette to give her that evil mirror vibe. And speaking of color, her most striking feature, yellow skin. No documented reasoning behind it. I'm assuming they just wanted her to stand out and look otherworldly. While that skin tone became part of her signature look, future versions would eventually drop it entirely, kicking off 40 plus years of fan debate over why. Bright yellow not translating well to traditional cell animation, the yellow being some kind of powered up state, corruption from her own magic, you name it, someone's theorized it. But as far as the OG toy goes, that's what they ran with. Personally, I'm more bothered by the overuse of eyeshadow. Mimi, is that you? Yeesh. That being said, despite her alienish yellow skin, it's worth noting that when Mattel started building out her backstory in the internal series Bible, written by Michael Halperin in 1982, Evil Lyn actually had a far more down-to-earth origin. Literally, she wasn't from Eternia at all. She was from Earth. According to the Bible, Evil Lyn was originally a human scientist and astronaut named Evelyn Powers, part of the same Earth space crew as Marlena Glenn, the woman who would go on to become Queen of Eternia and He-Man's mother. As the story goes, Evelyn was consumed with jealousy that Marlena got picked to pilot the shuttle over her. And when the ship crash-landed on Eternia, Evelyn ended up stranded in Skeletor's neck of the woods, Infinita, where the planet's dark energies twisted her scientific mind into raw sorcery. Maybe that explains the yellow skin, who knows? But it gets even weirder. She wasn't the only one. While Marlena got separated from the rest of the crew in the crash, two other crew members, Dr. T.E. Scope and Biff Beastman, ended up alongside Evelyn and became the evil warriors Triclops and, well, if the last name didn't give it away, Merman. just kidding. Beastman. It's a strange origin that never made it to mainstream print except for one storybook, New Champions of Eternia. So yes, it's real. It happened. Fortunately, once Filmation writers got their hands on the property, they hated it. Marlena's Earth origin stuck around, but the rest of the crew's inclusion got quietly shelved and ignored for decades. Until Mattel dragged it back out of the vaults years later. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stick with Filmation for now. Oh, but wait, you might be wondering, what about the actual original source material for these characters, the mini-comics? Well, surprisingly for a character who'd go on to become this prominent, there's not much Evil Lyn in them. Her first appearance is in Masks of Power, and it's about as passive as an introduction as you can get. Prince Adam and Fisto dig up the mystic Masks of Power in some ancient ruins, and from afar, Skeletor and Evil Lyn watched with gleeful greed. She doesn't even get a single line of her own, and from there she shows up in a handful more issues, mostly just standing next to Skeletor, doing nothing. So back to Filmation, where we'll finally see her in some real action, and almost immediately, a new skin color. Because when Filmation got their hands on Evil Lyn, they dropped her yellow coloring entirely, giving her a pale Caucasian complexion, along with a few aesthetic upgrades. Dark purple and black armor and a proper cape. Voiced by the legendary Linda Gary, who voiced basically every major female character in the show, Teela, the Sorceress, and Queen Marlena, Evil Lyn finally became what she was always destined to be within Skeletor's ranks, the smartest person in the room. Not a whipping boy like Beastman, or a silly fly swatter wielder like Trapjaw, left in charge of Snake Mountain whenever Skeletor stepped out, and clearly capable of running the place better than he did. In fact, in the episode Evil Lyn's Plot, she shows just how capable she is, successfully stealing a rare mineral called Korodite from a tribe of little dudes called Widgets by disguising herself as a damsel in distress in need of rescue. It's your typical Trojan horse play with blonde hair, as she's brought into their fortified village, gains the Widgets' trust, then steal the Korodite. Easy peasy. Actual competency aside though, the most important thing Filmation did for Evil Lyn was give us more to chew on with regards to her actual character. For a cartoon aimed squarely at kids, the show planted some real seeds here, not just for who Evil Lyn would become in later versions of the franchise, but for the actual relationship between her and Skeletor, which, to put it lightly, was never exactly healthy. That groundwork stacks up fastest across two specific episodes. In The Witch and the Warrior, Skeletor sends Evil Lyn to steal the waters of the Fountain of Life. Fairly straightforward until she runs into a rival wizard named Kothos, who strips her of her powers, and suddenly, she's forced into an uneasy alliance with Teela just to survive, the two of them stranded together in the desert. It's the desert heat that gives us our first real reveal. Evil Lyn has white hair under the helmet. A nice bit of new information, but the real takeaway is that she's perfectly willing to team up with an enemy against a bigger threat. She and Tila take down Kothos together, with Evil Lyn transforming him into a sand slug. She does get badly wounded in the fight, but thanks to the fountain's waters, she survives. And then she does something rather unexpected. She refuses to finish her original mission and steal the water. Her own code, not Skeletor's orders, wins out. Then there's the direct sequel, Revenge is Never Sweet. A de-slugified Kothos returns for payback, capturing He-Man and offering him to Skeletor in exchange for Evil Lyn, the one who turned him into a slug in the first place. Skeletor does not hesitate for a second. He cages up his own second-in-command and hands her over without blinking. I mean, to be fair, can Skeletor actually blink? Anyway, you could write this off as Skeletor just being Skeletor, but it defines something bigger. Not just his loyalty to his henchmen or lack thereof, but the specific shape of his relationship with his most capable lieutenant. A relationship future iterations of the franchise will dig into a whole lot further. That said, as with the previous episode, Evil Lyn shows she's not above working with the enemy to save her own skin. She uses her magic to free He-Man, who then returns the favor by rescuing her. Same lesson as before, reinforced. Evil Lyn survives by any means necessary, even if it means making nice with the most powerful man in the universe. And so, with those seeds planted in the 80s, we'd have to wait almost 2 decades to see them bear fruit, starting with the 2002 revival of Masters of the Universe, courtesy of the new cartoon from Mike Young Productions. Voiced by Kathleen Barr, it's here in this new hyper-stylized anime reboot that Evil Lyn's character would fully blossom. In the show, we're introduced to a brand new character, the Faceless One, a tragic, ghost-like sorcerer haunting the ruins of an ancient destroyed city from Eternia's mythic past, which is exactly where this story starts, deep in Eternia's ancient past, Preternia, ruled by the Council of Wisdom and locked in constant conflict with King Hiss and his snake men. One specific council member, the Lord of Zalicia, breaks an ancient edict by secretly marrying and having a child, and when King Hiss finds out, he has the infant kidnapped outright, holding her as leverage. But because the Lord of Zalicia broke the council's rules, the rest of them refused to help him, and left with no other options, he makes an insane gamble. He summons Serpos, a dormant, gigantic, 3-headed snake god his family had guarded against for untold generations, fully aware Hiss won't be able to control it. Serpos wakes up and starts leveling the city of Zalicia on sight. Hiss panics and returns the baby, and in the chaos, a mysterious stranger shows up, fully hooded, blue-skinned, giving us absolutely no clue as to his true identity. Wink, wink. He offers the Lord of Zalicia a deal. Hand over the Havoc staff, and he'll take the baby somewhere even Hiss can't reach, and raise her as his own. Out of options, with his baby daughter's survival as his sole concern, the Lord agrees. The stranger vanishes with the baby, and the Lord goes off to face Serpos himself, with Zalicia burning to the ground. Although he fails to defeat the beast alone, the council steps in and finishes the job, sealing Serpos away in living stone, locked in a mountain. You know, a snake mountain. But despite the win, the council still hands down its judgment, condemning the Lord of Zalicia to an eternal life devoid of the humanity that cursed him, becoming a faceless one, a shadow of the man he once was, doomed to haunt the ruins of Zalicia for all eternity. So, nice story, yeah? But where the hell am I going with all this? I mean, this still is a video about Evil Lyn, right? Well, remember the stranger? He kept his promise. He took the Lord of Zalicia's daughter far into the future and raised her. And she grew up to be, you guessed it, Evil Lyn. And as for the stranger, he turned out to be an ambitious alchemist named Keldor, the very man she'd eventually fall for. To be clear, he was like her guardian, not some creepy father-daughter thingy, okay? From that point on, Evil Lyn stays by Keldor's side as his closest companion, right up until his attempt to retake the throne from his brother, Randor, goes horribly wrong and he's mortally wounded. His face melted clean off. It's Evil Lyn who drags his dying body to the sanctuary of a demonic warlord named Hordak, desperately bargaining to save him, which he does. But the magic that saves Skeletor also strips away everything that made him him. He comes out of the other side as Skeletor, and the man she loved is functionally gone. Which brings us to the present day of the series, where we still find Evil Lyn serving at Skeletor's side. The man she once loved, whose life she personally saved, now just another guy who sees her as a tool in his war against He-Man and nothing more. Understandably, she's not thrilled about that, and that resentment drives her to plot against him at every chance she gets. At one point, Evil Lyn secretly allies with the Snake Man Cobra Khan, who casually shows up at Snake Mountain's door to free King Hiss and the Snake Men, and who, once freed, promptly kicks Skeletor off the throne and reclaims Snake Mountain. As the one who freed him, Evil Lyn assumes she's earned a seat of honor at Hiss's table. Instead, once he decides she's served her purpose, he puts her on the table instead. Well, figuratively, that is. As his next meal, he tries to eat her, literally. No longer useful to the Snake Man, she's forced to flee into hiding with an enraged Skeletor hunting her down, until He-Man rescues her, at the request of the Faceless One. Remember him? Evil Lyn's cursed immortal father haunting the ruins of Zelicia? Now, you'd think once she's out of danger, she'd finally take He-Man up on his offer to join the good guys. But she doesn't. She runs straight back to Skeletor, promising never to betray him again. A promise she, of course, doesn't keep. When the time is right, she teams up with another Dark Wizard, Count Marzo, to bring back Hordak. You know, the demonic warlord who created Skeletor in the first place, back to Eternia from his prison in the dimension of Despondos. At this point, you'd think she would have learned her lesson, but she hadn't. Thankfully, He-Man foils that attempt too, and Marzo, who was never really all that invested to begin with, takes back his amulet and violently turns on Evil Lyn and then splits. And that's basically where the show leaves it. Evil Lyn back at Skeletor's side just in time to watch King Hiss use an ancient artifact called the Amulet of Serpos to awaken, well, Serpos, and lay waste to Eternia, leaving He-Man and friends to take down the Serpent God once and for all in the series finale. That said, there's a pretty big jump between those two last beats. Evil Lyn betraying Skeletor yet again, but somehow ending back in the fold, and King Hiss suddenly having a powerful artifact in hand to resurrect his Serpent God. Well, to find out what actually happened in between, and it's a lot, you'd have to read between the episodes. Literally, in the pages of the tie-in comics by MV Creations. So, apparently, Evil Lyn doesn't walk away from that failed Hordak ritual scot-free. It left her poisoned by direct contact with Despondos itself, comatose, abandoned, and dying, and leaving the good guys with a genuinely desperate problem. With their own magic powerless to help her, they end up handing her over to the enemy anyway, because it's the only shot she's got. Which brings us back to the Faceless One, Evil Lyn's daddy dearest. He strikes a deal with King Hiss. He'll hand over the power to control Serpos, the Amulet of Serpos, the exact thing Hiss has been chasing this entire time, in exchange for his daughter and Skeletor. And that's Skeletor specifically, not a powerful sorcerer. Him, because the Faceless One's reasoning is ice cold and completely airtight. Skeletor is bound to Hordak, and Hordak is bound to Despondos, which means Skeletor, and only Skeletor, has any real chance of drawing that same poison back out of her. And so the Snake Men kidnap Evil Lyn from the good guys and storm Snake Mountain and drag Skeletor to Zelicia. Unsurprisingly, when he realizes what's actually being asked of him, his response is a flat, furious no. This isn't a hero answering the call. This is a villain being handed a job he clearly wants no part of. But when he's told point blank that without his help, Evil Lyn dies, maybe out of some convoluted sense of owing her one for saving his life all those years ago, or maybe it's just a tiny spark of Keldor still lingering somewhere in the deepest recess of his soul, Skeletor mutters, "I should leave you to die, and yet I cannot." And he heals her. Evil Lyn lives, and Skeletor carries her off to fight another day. His and his men get exactly what they came for, the amulet of Serpos, and He-Man's left holding the bag because the comic story leads directly into the series finale where he's forced to deal with a freshly revived Serpos. And speaking of Serpos, I suppose that this is a good time as any for my obligatory plug for this channel. So, if you're enjoying this video and want to help Stories from Grayskull grow even more, please like, comment, share, and give the channel a sub. That being said, any way you choose to help goes a long, long way, so thank you. Now, if there's one major thing the 2000X series did for Evil Lyn, it's that it cemented her connection to Skeletor, a relationship that would go on to play a huge role in every future iteration of the character. The bio that came with the Masters of the Universe Classics toy line tried to tie together as much of the franchise's prior fiction as it could, and in Evil Lyn's case, it gave her a definitive name pulled back from a corner of the franchise long thought shelved and forgotten. Evelyn Morgan Powers, the discarded 1982 Earth astronaut name from the Halperin Bible. And don't worry kiddies, that's all they brought back, at least in classics fiction. She still holds onto her 2000X Zilician heritage, and in line with that, her father, the Nameless One, finally gets a name too, Nicholas Powers. But unlike the series, this gave rise to a different familial framing all its own. In this classics version, she's no longer a baby snatched up from the past. She starts her story in the present, leaving her home in a fit of teenage rebellion. Taking the name Evil Lyn, she traveled to Eternia, learning from many of its great masters the ways of magic and the dark arts. While searching for new ways to increase her power, she met and fell in love with Keldor. And well, you know the rest. The bio goes on to credit her with basically single-handedly destabilizing Eternia, freeing the Snake Man and Hordak from their interdimensional prisons, all in various attempts to overthrow Skeletor. Par for the course for 2000X Evil Lyn. Speaking of which, her distinct pale skin look from that series earned her a second figure in the Classics line, packaged with a bombshell that I don't think anybody saw coming. She and Skeletor had secretly married and had a son. Now, before anyone says, ew, let me rephrase that. She and Keldor had a son, but when Keldor transformed into Skeletor, he had zero interest in family life, and so, like her father before her, Evil Lyn sent the kid into the future to protect him. Eventually, she abandons the entire war just to follow him there. And speaking of the future, in 2021, we got not one, but two new He-Man series on Netflix. The first was a CGI series aimed at a younger audience, reimagining the franchise for the next generation. Evil Lyn, now known as just Evelyn, is in it from the start and is a main antagonist throughout. But this is a completely different character. Voiced by Grey DeLisle, this Evelyn is noticeably younger, so there's no romantic subtext with this series version of Keldor, and definitely not with Skeletor. The series doesn't dig especially deep into her character, but it does throw one major curveball right before the show got cancelled. In this continuity, her father is Hordak. Look, if you're an OG fan who's adverse to change, I won't blame you for skipping this CGI series entirely. But for what it set out to do, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I'm beyond disappointed it got cancelled. That said, for anyone craving something more traditional, writer-director Kevin Smith gave us Revelation the same year. Using the classic cartoon as a springboard, Smith set out to do something new to fairly polarizing results. He basically took the big boys, He-Man and Skeletor, out of the picture for a stretch and let the respective women walk. Sorry, I know that's not the most appropriate term to use, but you know what I mean. While Teal is clearly set up as the lead, at least for the first half of the show, Evil Lyn's story is a very close second. Voiced by Lena Headey of Incest is the Best fame. I kid. For those not in the know, she played Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones. This version starts life as a street kid in the slums of Zalicia, fleeing her own starving parents after they try to kill and eat her on her 5th birthday. Seriously, what is it with people trying to eat this woman? Anyway, after taking refuge in the sewers for 20 years, She is eventually rescued by Skeletor, who takes her under his wing and teaches her real magic, which she goes on to master completely. And despite a rather promising start, we all know where this relationship ends up, right? As she rises through Skeletor's ranks, she finds herself trapped in what the show makes very explicit is an emotionally abusive relationship. I mean, how many times can one woman be called a boob before it starts to wear on them? Seriously though, when Skeletor and He-Man both depart in the premiere, Evil Lyn ends up in an unusually confusing place, made worse by the fact that all of Eternia's magic, her literal lifeblood, has been drastically depleted along with them. Left with no choice, she joins Teela and her band of companions to recover the two halves of the Sword of Power and restore magic to the universe, which they do. And that's when things get fun. Because Skeletor and He-Man both come back too, and while it initially looks like Evil Lyn's just falling back in line, she does what she does best. She turns on him completely. But she doesn't turn good. Oh no, 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 no. She turns into a god. Skeletor doesn't just come back. He manages to claim the Sword of Power for himself and ascends into a new godlike form called, well, Skelegod. And that's when Evil Lyn, reinstated at his side as the new bat-themed sorceress that looks kinda silly but cool at the same time, makes her move. She seduces him into temporarily giving up control of Grayskull's power, and yes, now we can all say it, ew! And then betrays that trust completely, seizing the sword for herself and calling on the power of Grayskull to merge with her own sorcery. And the result is a being more powerful than He-Man, Skelegod, or any sorceress before her ever was. Dark-Lyn. With the power of a literal god, her goal shifts from mastering the universe to annihilating it. Not out of malice, but as a broken response to a lifetime of being used. Seeing the world and the universe as devoid of meaning, and she tries to wipe it out, her own existence included. But in the climactic final battle against the new sorceress, Teela, she's finally talked down. Teela makes her see that yes, the universe is pain and death and hurt exactly like Lyn says, but it's also beauty, life, and love. It's enough to make her break down crying at how beautiful the universe actually is, and she voluntarily lets go of her godlike powers. And while you think that almost ending existence, actually managing to destroy Eternia's heaven, Preternia, and every soul in it, would make her plenty deserving of damnation, Evil Lyn is spared. She walks off into the next chapter in the sequel series, Revolution, where her arc is entirely about penance. She spends the series mentoring Teela in Ka magic, the same serpent sorcery tied to her own Zaletian bloodline, under her own mentor, the ancient dragon Granamyr. When Skeletor makes his final play for power, Granamyr dies defending Eternia, but not before making it clear Lyn has earned her redemption. She healed him, helped take down Skeletor for good, and somewhere along the way quietly drops the evil from her name. Good Lyn, as Granamyr puts it, right before he goes. In the end, Good Lyn is summoned before Zodak, leader of a morally neutral organization called the Cosmic Enforcers, beings dedicated purely to preserving cosmic balance. He welcomes her into their ranks for bringing balance not only to herself but to the universe as a whole, and she accepts and ascends, literally, into a role overseeing the entire multiverse. So for a woman who's been betrayed, abandoned, and driven to godhood and back, Evil Lyn's story ends with her becoming one of the most powerful, most trusted beings in Eternia's entire cosmology. Now, one thing worth noting, Revolution also brought back another classic villain, Hordak, whose impending arrival was strongly hinted at in Revolution through his agent, Motherboard, voiced by the actress Meg Foster. A nifty little Easter egg, I'm guessing, given her previous role as well, Evil Lyn, in the very first live-action Masters of the Universe movie, all the way back in 1987. Now, that movie has its fair share of issues. But I think most people would agree Foster's performance as Evil Lyn, with her natural icy blue-gray eyes, isn't one of them. It's the perfect complement to Frank Langella's equally great take on Skeletor. That said, the behind-the-scenes story is rough. Her costume, including a fiberglass breastplate, weighed roughly 45 pounds and caused actual bruising. She physically couldn't sit down in it for the entire shoot, which is why Evil Lyn is never once seated in the movie. Foster said she used that discomfort, letting the weight force her into a rigid, chest-out posture that became the character's whole physicality. For what it's worth, her Evil Lyn is possibly one of the best parts of that movie. After Detective Lubbock, that is. Rest in peace, James Tolkien. Anyway, after that, it'd be almost 40 years before Masters of the Universe returned to live action. And of course, Evil Lyn's inclusion was a given. This time played by Alison Brie. And look, while I was a big fan of her work on Community and even Glow, I just don't think she hit the gravitas I'd come to expect from Evil Lyn, thanks to her predecessors like Meg Foster and Cersei Lannister. Lena Headey. She was decent enough overall, but I just kept hearing Annie Edison from Community every time she spoke. Now, while neither live-action Evil Lyn played a huge part in their respective movies, their portrayals were both pretty accurate. Both were constantly by Skeletor's side, serving as his number 2, both verbally disrespected, threatened, and physically abused, and through it all, both flashing casual looks of defiance and quiet plotting. And both walking away without much fuss the moment Skeletor falls. All consistent beats for what makes Evil Lyn, Evil Lyn. And that's the through line. On the surface, Evil Lyn can easily be dismissed as the ultimate betrayer, constantly plotting to overthrow Skeletor. But that's not how I see it. In almost every iteration, Evil Lyn is saved by Keldor or Skeletor, and she repays that debt with her utmost loyalty. And what does she get in return? Not just his indifference, but often outright cruelty, after giving him everything, including in many cases, her love. But she's not stupid. Like I said in the beginning, she's easily the smartest person in the room. Evil Lyn's betrayals are not just some bad girl randomness. They're a rational person's response to being devalued, dismissed, and discarded by the dude she's loyal to. Even in a franchise built on bone thrones and power swords, there's something almost mundane and real about that. The sharpest mind in Skeletor's court, repeatedly passed over, repeatedly blamed, eventually deciding she's done. Which brings us to the second aspect of her character. Evil Lyn is a survivor. Think about it. She's been manhandled, physically and emotionally abused, caged and traded away like a bargaining chip, and almost literally eaten by a king she'd just freed from imprisonment. She's been poisoned by dark magic and left comatose. She's absorbed the actual power of a god, tried to unmake all of existence, and stopped before it cost her everything. And every single time, she's the one still standing at the end. She walks away. That's 40 plus years of a character who figured out, over and over again, that nobody else was going to look out for her. So she'd better be the smartest, most adaptable person in every room she walks into. Skeletor discards her. Hiss tries to eat her, for crying out loud. And every time, she doesn't just recover. She comes back sharper, more dangerous, and exactly one step ahead of whoever burned her last. So say what you want about Evil Lyn. Call her treacherous. Call her manipulative. Call her the ultimate backstabber in a franchise full of them. Call her evil. But don't ever call her disposable, because nobody has ever actually managed to get rid of her for good. Bottom line, whatever era, whatever continuity, whatever color her skin happens to be that decade, Evil Lyn is not someone you'd want to toy around with. Which finally brings us to the last part. Let's talk toys. And warning, there's a lot of them, so let's try something a little different. Speed Round. 1983, the original vintage line, the one that started it all. Bright yellow skin, light and dark blue armor, and a glow-in-the-dark crystal wand. Built on Tila's body mold with an all-new head. If you had this one as a kid, congratulations, you're now sitting on one of the most argued about color schemes in toy history. 2003, the 2000X line, the Four Horsemen redesign translated into plastic. Pale skin, purple armor, gothic headdress, a proper magical staff. Still basically a major retool of Tila. 2010, Masters of the Universe Classics. Back to the yellow skin and blue armor, but on the modernized Classics buck, which means a better sculpt, more articulation, and more accessories. And a companion in Screech, the evil counterpart to the sorceress's own bird, Zor. 2011, two more classic additions. Battleground Evil Lyn, the figure that came with the secret sun reveal built right into the bio card. Pale 2000X inspired sculpt, unmasked white-haired head option, cape, awesome. Faceless one. Obviously not Evil Lyn, but worth a mention because it's cool that even Daddy Dearest gets a figure. 2016 Club Grayskull line, a Filmation-accurate release. Less detailed, built to look exactly like she did in your TV screen in 1983. Still holding that Corodite she stole from the widgets and will most likely turn you into a sand slug if you try to take it away from her. 2020 MOTU Origins, a modern, highly articulated update on the original vintage sculpt, meaning yellow skin is back, baby! Although the following year an alternate gray skin variant was released to keep all Evil Lyn fans happy. And from here, things really pick up. 2 in 2021, Masterverse Revelation, a figure based on her Netflix Revelation design. A two-piece staff, alternate hands, and a small shoulder bag. Yay to the long-haired alternate head, nay to the more conservative outfit. Hey man, that armored-up leotard look is iconic. Power Attack CGI series line, spring-loaded Power Attack feature built for the kid-focused Netflix CGI series. The one where her dad's Hordak and those humongous bat-wing shapes sprouting out of the sides of her head kind of confirm it before the show even does, if you ask me. 2 in 2023, Masterverse Skeletor's Sorceress Evil Lyn. This one I like to call the Batty Seductress Evil Lyn, also from Revelation, from when Evil Lyn was promoted by Skelegod to be his new sorceress. Masterverse Dark-Lyn, the God Lyn deluxe figure. This is the She Tried to Unmake the Universe figure. Not a fan of this look at all. All the power in the universe and you can't conjure up some boots. And abs? Really? They might as well have called this one He-Lyn. I mean, it's right there in her chest. Anyway, 2 more in 2024. MOTU Origins Cartoon Collection, doing the same thing Club Grayskull did 8 years earlier, but now in the smaller retro origin style. Masterverse 1987 movie, based on her look from the 1987 movie, complete with a fiberglass breastplate. Just kidding. But yeah, Meg Foster in plastic form, natural ice blue-gray eyes and all. 3 in 2025. Masterverse New Eternia, a modern reimagining of the vintage figure. Really nice head sculpt, I think. A more natural flesh tone, extra hands, her trusty orb staff, and a soft goods cape. All you need to call it good. Lyn. Mondo 1/6 scale. The premium collector piece with a premium collector price. Soft goods cape and skirt, faux fur detailing, multiple interchangeable heads, multiple swappable hands, including a dedicated spellcasting one, multiple scepter options, and a partridge in a pear tree. Okay, actually, it's a screech on a perch, but you get the idea. If you've got the space, and more importantly, the moolah, this one's for you. MOTU Origins 2000X Cartoon Collection, the Origins version of the 2000X cartoon look. Just a little less hyper-anime. Just a little. And finally, 2 more so far in 2026. Masterverse Vintage Collection, another modernized but more straightforward take on the vintage figure, and a full return to the yellow skin. Masters of the Universe Chronicles Alison Brie. I mean, Evil Lyn, but damn if she doesn't still look a hell of a lot like Annie Edison. I'm still waiting for this one, but those promo pics look pretty good. And that, my friends, is a wrap. And speaking of wraps, have you heard of the Horde villain literally covered in them? If you want to know more about the Mummy Rat Trap and other Horde oddities in my collection, you can check out their story here. Or if you want my latest one, that's over here. Either way, thanks for watching and I hope to hear from you in the comments below. Go ahead and tell me your story.